Responsive web design allows a web page to respond to the size of the browser. We can do this easily with two simple things. The first of which is a meta tag that's going to control the viewport. This is very important because when we think of responsive web design, we think of mobile devices, things like your phone. And a lot of times your phone has two different pixel dimensions. The display port, what we see, and then the actual pixels. By default, it's going to use the actual pixels. That is, unless we tell it to use the display port so that it can display appropriately. The reason for this is they pack extra pixels in to make it so the lines between it is much smoother and easier to read. Because it's on a smaller screen, this is very important for readability. However, it tends to mess up our CSS. So let's take a look at how we're going to add that. Here's a web page that I've created, and notice I've called it responsive.css. Right now, if I resize this, you'll notice that, yes, the elements the text moves around and stuff, but it doesn't change the way it looks. So I'm going to come into my code editor, I'm going to add the viewport. Notice it's meta name equals viewport, and then I have two things. First off, under content, I have width equals device width, and then I have initial scale set to 1. This is very important. This is going to be 100%. Now, this does not allow me to resize. However, if I go back to my web browser, and I'm using Firefox for this, I can come in here. So I come into my hamburger menu. That's that three little lines are off on the far right-hand side. Choose More Tools, and I'm going to choose Responsive Design Mode. There is a keyboard shortcut, but a lot of people can't remember it, so we use this. This is going to show us what it's going to look like on different size screens. So you'll notice that our information is jammed in there and different things like that. Depending upon the size of screen that we look at, I can choose different ones. So here's a Galaxy S20, and I can choose an iPhone mini. You'll notice that it kind of adjusted my size for me. Now, what size it's going to be is really going to depend based upon the size of my screen. I'm going to come in here and remove this viewport and reload, and notice how it changes what's seen. All I did was reload it. So that viewport's very important for making sure it's going to show correctly. Let's go back and re-add that meta viewport. And now let's go to our styles. Our styles is the second thing that we're going to work on. And how we're going to use this is we're going to use a media query. A media query starts with @media, and then we're going to define what type of media. Well, how's it going to display? For everything, just for print? Well, we're going to do it for a screen. Then we'll say and max width. In our case, we're going to go ahead and say 475 pixels. Then we'll have our open and closing braces. Now within these, we can put any set of tags that we want. So I might have, for example, my image-left. Notice that Visual Studio Code is realizing other classes we created that we might want to recreate in here. And I'm going to say float, none. I'm also going to say max-width 100%. And I'm going to specify margin to be my top and bottom. I'm going to specify 0 for my top, auto for my right hand side, 10 pixels for my bottom, and auto for my left hand side. Okay, so this way, if my image is smaller than my containing element, it's going to center it. If it's the full size of my containing element or bigger, I'm going to shrink it down so it's just within that containing element. Query here, reload, and you'll notice that it now fits appropriately within that containing element. We gave it the extra padding, none on the top, because I have this heading here. That's going to automatically push it down. I don't need to add to it. But I did give a little bit of margin at the bottom so that I don't have my text right up against it. My text by default is fitting all good, but I want to do a little something with this contact. So I'm going to specify button, and I'm going to say display block. This is going to make a block level element, so I can then do margin auto. Once again, going to center it. However, by default, my display block is going to be 100%. I don't want that. So I'm going to say max width 80%. Now when I reload this, you'll see that my button is now centered, and so all my information is perfectly aligned. It fits inside of that box just the way it was intended. You'll do notice that my menu is not correct. So you notice that my navigation bar is kind of stepping on one another because it doesn't fit inside that window anymore. So what do we do about that? Well, typically what we're going to do is we're going to put a completely different set of styles. We'll often have to use some JavaScript to hide our menu navigation. Often you'll see like 3 little lines called the hamburger menu. You can click on it and then the menu appears. So we'll use some JavaScript for that, and then we'll simplify our navigation, maybe just so it's 1 on each line. Now, we haven't done JavaScript, so I'm not going to show you that part, but let me show you the menu navigation. And specify padding to, instead of being auto or anything else, I'm just going to make it 5 pixels. I'm going to set margin. Also, top and bottom, I'm going to have 10 pixels. Left and right, I'm going to have 0, because I want to have them stacked, but I want to have enough space that if I click on it or I touch on it with my finger, that I'm not going to accidentally hit the wrong thing. Border radius, I'm going to set to 0. Border, I'm going to set to none. And display, I'm going to do block. That way, every item is on its own separate line. Save this. Reload. Notice that now I have all my elements on their own separate line. So we come and look at this, we reload. We notice that not everything is as we would expect. That's because we still have CSS specificity. So what I'm going to do is come back in here. I can have header, navbar A, come back to my responsive page, reload. Notice that now I got rid of my rounded edges. I now have spacing in between my navigation links, so it's easier for me to click on them, all those types of things. Could I remove my background color and my text colors and things like that to make it a little bit more plain? Yes, I could. Now, the one thing, like I said, is missing is the JavaScript element. Things where I would show, for example, a little pull-down menu, or maybe that hamburger, that little box with the 3 lines in it. You click on it and navigation menu appears. Those types of things right now are hidden. Could I add those? Yes. Typically, they need some JavaScript. We don't have that just yet, so we're not going to show that part. Now, another option is to use a CSS framework, maybe something like Bootstrap, which has that JavaScript built in for you. So that's going to be what we're going to look at next.